No Child's Play, Writing for Children and Young Adults. And the moderator is Deepa Srinivas, who is a professor at the Center for Women's Studies, University of Hyderabad. Her research interests include visual culture, childhood studies, and feminist pedagogy. She is the author of Sculpting a Middle Class History, Masculinity, and the Amar Chitrakatha in India. Her research articles have appeared in Indian Journal of Gender Studies, Feminist Theory, Economic and Political Weekly, Tasveer Ghar, and Childhood. She is the series editor for Different Tales, a series of illustrated books for children, drawing on the experiences and stories from marginalized communities. She is one of the contributors for Towards a World of Equals, a bilingual textbook on gender, and A World of Equals, a textbook on gender. Thank you for coming here.
Thank you so much for introducing me, and thank you, the organizers of HLF, Usha in particular, for having asked me to be here and share the podium with two very exciting authors. And as I was telling Menaka, I wish I had read them way earlier, and maybe when I was a child, and I had so many questions and no answers. And first I thought, what am I doing here? Then I thought, maybe I should be here because, well, if you look at my own credentials and my work, all that I've done is ruin children's literature. And so people say, no, you have not really worked on children's literature, and you have dragged it into politics, into culture, and into all kinds of wrong things. That childhood is an area of innocence, it's a sheltered place, and you've tried to draw out other trajectories. So I felt really reassured when I read your work, because maybe, but seriously, in 90s when I was working on Amar Chitrakatha, which is a very mainstream kind of phenomenon, but I actually looked at it as participating in the moment of politics of the 70s, 60s, in the, in the discourse, the Hindu majoritarian discourse and so on. So that was one. But one more thing that probably, I'll go on to introduce you both, but actually let me start by introducing Andalib and Menaka, because then it will connect, as to what it is that they will, you could probably expect from them today. So Andalib Wajid is a hybrid author. That's something that hybrid is a very loaded term, I think. Having published 40 novels in the past 14 years, that makes you so very prolific, and something that one must learn as to how, by way of writing also. And she enjoys writing in a number of different genres, such as young adult, romance, and horror. So Menaka is a children's book author and communications consultant. She is the author of a number of books, again, very many interesting books for children. Although you have to, as you'll see, you'll have to, actually adopt a very expansive notion of childhood and children to actually relate to both their works. So these works include How to Reach Mars and Other Impossible Things, which was published in 2023, The Great Escape 2022, and Loki Takes Guard 2020, which is a book that I fell in love with, which won the Valley of Words Award for writing for young adults. And I've been told that, all of you have this with you, so I'm not really going to go on and on about their profiles, and I'm sure many of them actually know your work. And they're here because your work interests you. So to start off, I was talking about a little bit about my work, Menaka and Andalib, because I thought it was only fair that I introduce myself beyond my name and whatever designation. So in early 2000s, And I think this was a very exciting moment where the idea of children's literature, writing for children, is actually expanding. And it is at this moment that I, as part of a group at Anveshi Research Center for Women's Studies, Hyderabad, we also started searching for children's literature which address some things which are completely absent in the more hegemonic, more dominant, more mainstream idea of children's literature, which looks at childhood as monolithic, as one uniform category across spaces, region, community, identity, and so on. So when I read both your works, that's why I said, I thought when I was doing that work, I wish I had come across. I felt that in your own way, as storytellers, you were also transgressing the idea of children's literature, childhood, undercutting the ideas of both of these, childhood and children's literature. So why don't we start off on that before, we go further.
Hi everyone, lovely to see all of you here. And we're both of us very thrilled to see, and thank you Deepa for doing this. Oh, I didn't really get what you wanted us.
You want a specific, so I'm just saying, Andali, what Usha told me is that you probably identify yourself more as young adult fiction writer. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I started out my writing career writing fiction for Open Sesame, which was a supplement in Deccan Herald, which I started reading as a child myself. And I started my writing career writing short stories for children. And I started writing for little older people. So I don't really stay within that boundary that I write only for young adults or for adults. For me, when I'm writing something, I really need to enjoy myself, and that's the first foundation, and I really hope that the readers enjoy it. So I don't really specifically decide on a genre or anything. So having said that, the young adult genre is my favorite genre as a reader, as a writer also. It's my first love. So I do stray to different genres, especially horror, which I find very difficult to write. But I'm combining actually both in an upcoming book, young adult and horror. And it's a graphic novel, and it's out in April, May. So I'm very excited about that. So I identify myself as a writer, not necessarily attaching any genre to myself. You want to add?
I write for children predominantly, but across kind of formats. So from picture books for very young readers to illustrated books for slightly older ones, chapter books, and some middle grade YA crossover, I would call Loki. I wouldn't really call it a young adult novel. And I think each of them, I think it is interesting what you said about how we see childhood as a time of innocence and children as very innocent. And I actually don't think they are as innocent as the grown-ups like to believe they are. I think children are quite dark. I think children can be quite, they are very complex, people. And they are people, they are individuals in their own right. And I think we like to, as the grown-ups, look at them as very sweet and innocent and lovely. And hence we think that the books that we write for them must be sweet, innocent, lovely, without kind of violence. But actually children experience violence in different ways and forms almost on a daily basis. Sometimes at home, unfortunately, on the playground, at school, in their classrooms. So they're experiencing all of these things, and then for us to kind of present this very rosy version of their existence and say, no, but this is what childhood is, seems very wrong and unfair. So I think I'm always trying to kind of show children as complex I think, I don't know if that's the right, but wanting things and wanting to do things for themselves, whether or not that upsets the grown-ups around them. And I think like Loki Takes Guard is very much about that, a girl who goes after what she wants, even though everyone around her is telling her that she shouldn't. And in Great Escape, a bunch of boys try and escape school and dig their way out of the bathroom because they don't want to sit in maths class. So, there are always children pushing these boundaries of what they are allowed to do and not, yeah.
Thank you for actually qualifying and sort of opening out what I was trying to say. And that's where I connected with both your works, because the way I look at myself, I look at, that complication of childhood. Somebody probably read out that one of my areas of study, research, is childhood studies. And where it sort of speaks to your work is that complication of childhood. And Menaka, you said childhood is a dark place. And what a metaphor to use when you say childhood is a dark place. And if we all look back at our own, I don't know if the kids here, but all of us had childhoods, and we would find moments which were really dark and anxious. They were fun moments, but they were very difficult moments that we could not even share with our parents or with our family and so on. So some of these tropes like domestic violence within the family, mental health issues, hunger, work, survival, how does one deal with the question of identity, menstruation? You deal with that in the book.
Loki.
Yeah, Loki, right? And it was so strange that Loki actually discovers at school, and she doesn't know what is happening to her the day she first starts menstruating. And it took me way, way back. And so I think the connection that you both make is by not consolidating the idea of children's literature, but by questioning it. That's how I read your work. So people who don't see themselves, for example, Loki, and there are many, many children who do not find themselves in the familiar idea of children's literature or books. So how would you, do you think that connection, how do you make that connection? Where does it come from? What is the rethinking that has gone into it?
To be very honest, when I'm writing, I really don't make these deep connections. I'm a very simple person and a very simplistic, I wouldn't say simplistic, I'm a simple writer. When I started writing, I realized, so the kind of books that we grew up reading were a lot of these, everything was from the West. When we were young, we had books like Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew and Enid Blyton. So we grew up reading that. We were, even our literature was colonized. So we grew up reading that. When I started writing, there is this tendency when you do these workshops with kids and you make them write stories, they do the same thing. They will write stories featuring some Jack and some Tina, and very anglicized names, because I think in their mind they can't really comprehend stories of people like us. And we're kind of, I think when I started writing, I made it a point to write about Indians, and then specifically Indian Muslims, because I feel that it wasn't a question of representation, nothing as lofty as that. I just felt that this is a subset I know best, and I'm always about authenticity, and I don't want to misrepresent someone else's experiences, and these are my lived experiences, so I can write about it with a fair amount of authenticity. So that was one of the main reasons, it was just for authenticity's sake. And over the years, it's grown into its own thing. It's become this thing, oh, you're writing about Muslims, oh, you're normalizing this. I'm like, it's the fact that, we have to normalize it, says a lot. So I am basically, at the heart of it, someone who is trying to write an entertaining story, I really don't want to give this message, sort of no messaging in my story. I'm a very entertaining writer, I hope. And that's basically what I try to do. And I think with that, when people absorb things, so that's like a really nice side effect. So I didn't really go about doing this in this way that, I have to do something, that there is this dearth of Indian representation in Indian literature. I wanted to write, and I didn't want to sound like a fool when I wrote it. So that was basically my reason for choosing my characters, my settings, and it's kind of worked out in its own way that, it's become a thing now.
I think it's worked out for Andalib and for her readers as well. So, I mean, it's a win-win for everyone. I think childhood is deeply unfair, if you think about it. It's the stage of your life where everyone other than you is making decisions for you and telling you that it's for your own good because they know better and because, they have your best interests at heart. And so from what time you have to wake up in the morning, to what you have to wear, to where you go to school, to what you should do with your time after school, what you're allowed to watch, who you're allowed to talk to. It is a very, very controlled time. And yet, children have to listen to grown-ups. I have 2 boys, and I tell them all the time, I do it myself, you're so lucky. Look at you guys, you kids, you've got such a wonderful life, and they hate it because if you ask them, they're like, but you're telling me what to do every minute of the day. Someone else is controlling my time. So I think childhood to children can feel deeply unfair. So I think for me, with some of my books, I'm trying to explore that unfairness and that feeling of being told what to do and feeling like you have to do it because your teachers are telling you, your parents are telling you, or a grown-up is telling you, but chafing against that and wanting to and what happens when you push against those boundaries? What happens when you transgress and you say, no, this is not what I want? And what does that mean for you, for the relationships you have with those around you, and that kind of thing? So I think with Loki, as I actually told someone once in a conversation, I said, she's not a very nice person. She's a very prickly person. She's not, I don't think I'd be friends with Loki in school. She's very angry and she's very kind of, she's got a lot of issues. I agree. Did you all hear that? Nice people are overrated and boring. Yeah. So I think that's the other thing. I don't think children want to read about good, quote-unquote children where, who are doing the right thing all the time. And they want to see that because maybe it's a way for them to see what it's like if they're not able to do it in their own lives. It's a way to explore that feeling and what it might mean to push against those things in a book.
And both of you, I don't think, are doing any messaging. And that is where you pull away from children's literature, which is meant,
at least.
Not overtly, but there is no discourse which would be without any kind of underlying, I mean, we don't live outside of ideological formulations. But you're not doing I can't call it didactic as the way children's literature is. That's one thing that I think one really looks forward to in children's literature, but very rarely does one find. But if we bring in the idea of fun and violence, very often violence has been fun. Even today it is. So Amar Chitrakatha also, and there are whole lot of children's literature which is fun, and we need to read them as they are. I'm not saying that we need to sanitize. But if you look closely, you will find tropes which are replete with violence towards women, towards other identities, other with capital O, and so on, towards marginalized identities. So in a way, when Andalib said, I write for the sake of entertainment, and Manika, you also do that, but I think there's a redefinement of that entertainment, and here I would like to bring in perspective, the idea of perspective. And that's where, I want to talk about a few of your books. So Andalib, you talked about Muslim identity. And I can speak for myself that when I met the characters in Jasmine Villa. And you have 3 books in that series. One Way to Love, Loving You Twice, 3 Times Lucky. And 3 Times Lucky is the one which I actually read about Atiya and Farhan. Yeah. So even I was surprised because I was expecting to meet a certain kind of Muslimness, Muslim identity which is given, and I did not find that. I found it's not like that identity goes out of the window because the name itself says something, the relationships. But whenever, why does one have to bear a certain cross all the time? And I think, Andali actually forces us to look at how a Muslim person would have relationships, would have trauma, and not everything relating to the question of nation, citizenship, and so on and so forth. I hope I'm getting across there. But so that's one thing. And then there's another book of yours, which I haven't read, but I look forward to. It's about Ananya. So who is overweight, and at a certain point, her parents announce their pregnancy. So it's a small thing, and I think Ayushmann Khurrana has also made a movie around that theme. But it is, then you are thinking, hell, it's unthinkable in children's literature, But it holds your interest. It is entertaining, but at the same time, it's raising some real issues and pushing us to look at the story from a different perspective. So that's where I found your work so very interesting. Now, Menaka, when Loki takes guard, right? It's about a kid who becomes a girl who's really, her passion lies in cricket, and then she's not allowed to, pursue that passion. But the child comes from a very ordinary kind of background, has a name like Lokanaiki, and short of that is Loki, and then the little details that come in, and the way the child finds an ally in a divorced woman who lives in the same building, so small alliances are built. Children are allowed to explore worlds that probably the idea of childhood does not allow us to explore. So that is where I feel, and there are many more books, but I won't take up so much time. If the reference comes up, maybe I'll return, and I hope you will also bring up examples. So it is that perspective which was so very striking for me, and definitely they're very entertaining books. So I just wanted you to respond to that.
So thank you so much. I think if you had read the books in the series, you would have probably been a little more used to that character who is like the firebrand character. So she's the heroine of the 3rd book. And as Deepa was saying, what I think is that, that I don't find anything unusual. For me, these girls are your typical on the cusp of millennials, Gen Z sort of thing, youngsters today who are out in the world trying to make a name for themselves, trying to do what's right for their parents, for themselves, trying to find love, trying to resist marriage and then give in eventually when, and then of course, so these are romances. Jasmine Villa, it's a romance series. So, it comes with those sort of expectations. You talked about Ananya's story, which is in Mirror, Mirror, and it was one of my, it's a story about fat shaming and how it affects youngsters. And I have another book out recently called The Henna Startup, which is about a young girl who wants to who makes an app to help her mother's henna business. So in all these stories, I just am aiming to tell the story of people like us, people like you and I, and normal people, And which is why, my romance novels don't fit into that category where you have these, alpha male billionaire heroes stepping out of helicopters and, swooping, into the scene. I can't write those stories. I have a very middle class sort of background, and it shows in each of my books. And so this, I just find, so the books that you mentioned, so many of my other books, they all feature people who are very relatable. So that's basically been the mainstay of my writing, is relatability and, finding people you can identify with, irrespective of whether they are Muslims or, any other religion. So it's just the whole thing of relatability and, finding that, as I like to keep telling people that, that most of my stories are about ordinary people having extraordinary moments in their lives and going through these extraordinary situations and coming back to the ordinary. So that's basically the gamut of it. And so far it's worked. So far it's got me a lot of readers and people really enjoy. And so the thing that you mentioned about being surprised is, again, and that you didn't find what you thought that you would find when you read these books. I think as you keep reading, and opening up and seeing all the different kind of writing that there is no sort of fixed formula as such. But especially in my writing, I often used to say that the characters being Muslim is incidental, and not something that I did on purpose. It was incidental. So I'm kind of, the way the situation is in our country, I'm being buffeted into making this into the standing point of my story, that, oh, it's a strong Muslim girl, And for me, when I wrote it, it was a strong girl. So, so I don't mind. I think having a strong Muslim girl at the core of my story is a sort of a goal sort of thing, which I think it's very aspirational for young girls, whether they're Muslims or not. So, I don't know, I think I rambled a lot.
I think I'll speak a little bit maybe to the entertainment and also kind of learning. Children's books are very often kind of categorized into this thing, but of learning. Like, what will children learn from this book when they read it? I used to work with an organization called Pratham Books quite a few years ago, and they make picture books in multiple Indian languages. And we would do field visits. We would go to schools, government schools, affordable private schools across the country. And this one time, we were in a village near Mangalore, and we were in the school, and we were talking to some children about books that had just come into their library. And I asked the children, well, what do you like about this book? What do you like? And this boy, he must have been in 7th standard, said, it has a very good moral, ma'am. And the book was about the life of the scientist, Mr. Vishweshwaraya, and about his work. And I was like, I don't know, what is the moral in this story? You want to tell me? He said, work hard. And across, when you meet young children, and if you are a grown-up asking them, what did you like about this book? You will get a very different answer from what they tell their friends. Most children like to say, there was a good moral in this story. I learned something. Because as adults, we've kind of drummed into children's heads that you must read because it's good for you. Like reading is eating broccoli or, something like that, right? It's a good thing for you and it'll do good things for you. But I think the main reason to read is because it's entertaining, and it's fun and it makes you happy and it gives you pleasure and joy. And really anything you get outside of that is incidental. It's like the cherry on top, right? Whether you learn something new about yourself or somebody else. So I think this whole idea of, what have you learned? What is this kind of moral or underlying message and theme? And I think that's where some books, when they kind of set out to give you or give the reader a message, I think kids can also smell it a mile away. They're really smart. And that's another thing we forget, is just how smart kids are. They know that we are trying to instruct them in something and they will resist it. Whereas I think if you just set out to tell them a fun, entertaining story, they're just going to get so much from it anyway. And they won't realize it, probably, but they would have just really, really enjoyed reading the story. And I think that's so important. And I know, Anjali, you said you write simplistic stories, but those are the simple stories which are so fun. I have her books got me through the pandemic, everyone. Jasmine Villa, Destination Weddings. Me and my colleague Radhika, I don't know if she's here in the audience, but throughout the pandemic and lockdown, we would read Andalib's stories and then we would live message each other. Like, have you come to this? Have you come to this part yet? Oh my God, do you believe that? And I mean, what else can do that for you? What an amazing thing for books to be able to do. Take someone out of what is a terrible time in everyone's lives and give them, respite and joy. And I think to be able to do that for children of all ages, for readers of all ages, is such a special thing.
No, that's so true for Andalib's stories as well as yours. Although you didn't say that, I have to say it. So Andalib, I was surprised because one doesn't see what you're doing too often. And I'll tell you why. And you can actually, if I'm wrong, please do let me know. Because when we were re-looking at children's literature in the early 2000s, and we did look at very different kinds of stories coming out of Pratham. Tulika has some very different stories and so on. What we found is that, children's literature can be very inclusive of certain identities, certain ideas of childhood, but it can also simultaneously be very exclusionary. So that a large number of children do not see themselves. For example, you don't see working childhood. But when you do see working childhood, it's in the mode of victimhood or through the gaze of pity and so on. Which is why I found your work so striking, and even your work. So it does not allow us to look at the children or the people who world your novels. And I'm using this term in a way, your novels are worlded with people or protagonists like Loki, like Atiya, who are in fact sullen sometimes and do not allow us to look at them through the perspective, through the point of view, through the gaze of pity. And so it's worlded with real people, relationships, and you said relatability. And so I would expand it to, I'm like, hey, there are worlds that we share. We have older sisters like this. We have younger sisters like this. We have somebody like Loki in our, I would also say, in terms of gender, who does not fit into any given idea of gender, in that sense. So that's what I was. So from there, what I would lead up to, I don't know how much time we have, but censorship. So children's literature is riddled with censorship. What you can say, what you cannot say, what you can read, so Jacqueline Rose says that a lot of books that are written or that are purchased for children is what parents would want children to read rather than what children would want to read themselves. But I think your work pushes that censorship. And what I want to know is, so it refuses to include in certain modes like victimhood, it refuses to exoticize and so on. But it brings in themes, like a simple theme of menstruation, the idea of fat shaming, all of these things you bring in, but not in expected modes, So I thought you might want to comment on that.
So when I started writing short stories for children, this idea of censorship that you mentioned, there was one story I'd written about this young boy who cuts himself while trying to shave. And he is not of the shaving age. He's just fascinated. So this is something I did myself as a child. I used to think, my father applying foam, and it was very fascinating. I was like, so I did it and I cut myself. So I wrote a story about that and I sent it to the editor and she rejected it immediately. she said, there's blood in this. So I'm like, oh God, I didn't know I should not write about blood, So this was a very long time ago. It was a very different world. I think we're talking about early 2000s. And things have changed a lot. And I think that although Indian literature, especially whether it's commercial fiction, romance, what I write, what Menaka writes, children's literature, and the young adult thing, I think we are somewhat fairly lucky for the kind of editors we have who help us push the envelope, who don't bind us, who don't tell us, no, you can't write about this. So far, we've been lucky, or maybe the topics that we've handled haven't really touched that point. But we've had some very good editors who I feel like they've got our backs. So they kind of help us push the envelope. Whatever we want to write about, they're okay with it. So that's been a huge help, and I really feel that we're lucky. And at the same time, Indian literature is not that well experienced by our target audience. So I was at a festival yesterday where we were talking about the reading habits of young adults. And we got a number of young adults. We asked them so the moderator asked them, what books do you read? What's the last book that you read? So the number of things that came up were all Western books written by white men, typically. So, there is still a long way to go, for Indian books to be popular. And as you mentioned, it's because of the parents who are the gatekeepers, parents, teachers. And so I really think that parents who think that they can protect their children from the horrors of the world have no idea what their children are really going through. So we all want to do that. We can't imagine our sweet little kids going through something traumatic. But like Menaka said earlier, reading about it gives them a safe space to explore that, to understand consequences also, possible consequences. So I think censorship would take away a lot from it. There is a lot of self-censorship I do, There are certain things I don't write about. And it's a conscious decision because I do want to keep writing for as long as I can, and not get banned or something. So that's basically my take on it.
Okay. I'll touch a little bit about the inclusion and exclusion also. I think one thing we've seen, at least definitely in the last 10 years, is, and in picture books as a starting point, maybe about 20 years ago, all the children in Indian picture books were fair-skinned and rosy-cheeked and very angelic looking, and they all conformed to certain body types and how they looked and things like that. I think one fantastic thing is, especially publishing houses like Pratham Books have really pushed how, the fact that a child should be able to pick up a book and see themselves reflected back in its pages, and how important that is. And not just in terms of like visually how we represent. There are so many, often the stories for children that get told from what is sadly collectively called the northeast of India, like we've just kind of lumped the whole region into one space, tends to be mythology, it tends to be folk tales and things like that. But the fact that, again now we're having own voices, we're having writers and illustrators from Nagaland, from Arunachal Pradesh, telling everyday stories of the children who live there. And I think that is really fantastic. So I think we're seeing definitely more diversity. We're seeing kind of more different kinds of stories told. We've had, books on body shaming. We've had books on mental health. Pratham Books did a picture book on domestic violence a few years ago that Asha Nehemiah wrote and told really, really sensitively. So I think we are, and it's only going to get better. Are we entirely there in terms of diversity and inclusion and things like that? No. But I think, like Andalib said, with the kinds of editors who are championing stories today and the kind of editors that we've worked with, I think it's only going to get stronger and better. And yes, I have been at so many lit fests, sitting there with books and parents coming, and a child will go up with 4 books and say, can I buy this? And the parent will look at them and say, but it's, you want to spend 300 bucks for 30 pages? This is, no, get this instead. And like some 500-page book will come out. So it also shows how we equate what is the value of a book, what is the worth of a book and things like that. So children, if they're constantly being told, you should read more and you should read, and then like, not this book though. Not these books that you want to read. You should only, so there is censorship. We probably don't have the kind of censorship that authors in the US are seeing, where it is at a school district level, at a library level, public library level, that kind of thing. But I think a lot of the censorship happens at home. It happens in libraries where librarians say, you're too old to read this, or you're too young to read this. Like, why are you reading this picture book? It's for a much younger child. So there's a lot of that censorship that happens as well. So I think those are things that, we need to be aware of.
Luckily for us, children are actually nowadays, I don't know whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, exposed to fragmented worlds, to heterogeneous worlds. But one of the focus in this festival is regional language. So I was thinking, and going back to my own reading in my own language, Odia also, that we do have regional stories and folk stories which blow away all censorship. I mean, you will find themes that some of which you both also address. For example, grief. I mean, she doesn't want to celebrate her birthday, Atiya, because her mother died 2 days before her birthday. And so grief, hunger, sexuality, and as we were searching for regional stories, I remember, and I'm just going to wind up because the audience is waiting for, to ask you both questions. I remember that the Dalit writer Gogu Shyamala, who's from Telangana, wrote a story on a Dalit child in the fields being assaulted, molested by the landlord. And the publisher said, this is not fit for the series of books which is supposed to be children's literature. And Shyamala was very firm. She says, this is what happens. And I will just tell you one inside story that they pushed us to change the word bitch to witch. I don't know what that one alphabet, when it was translated. So which doesn't even mean anything. But what Shyamala said is that every other day we come across, or in my childhood I have come across these words. And so regional language does. And I think when Andali is saying Indian literature, is talking about the kind of mainstream literature which also sanitizes the trajectories, folk trajectories, regional trajectories, and so on. So I think at this point, shall I open up the discussion? Because I'm sure the audience is really keen to respond and ask questions.
I get asked a lot, why did I put this in the book? And I get asked by children a lot, like, why did you write about this? And I said, because it happens. To, all women of a certain age, it will come and you will get your periods for the first time and it happens to you. So I put it in there. I think I think you have to kind of, whether you choose to write about it, however you choose to write about it, has to feel true to you and to kind of what your voice might be as a writer. I tend to deal with things very often as with humor, as a way of kind of dealing with things for me. So kind of Loki gets her periods for the first time in geography class with Bala ma'am, who's giving everyone a test. And, she gets terrible stomach cramps and the teacher thinks she's just faking it to get out of the test. And there's this whole, thing around it. And of course she goes home and, she finds out she's gotten her period and she tells her mother, can I wear white pants and jump over puddles and have this wonderful life now? And her mother's like, no, that's not what it's like. So I think that was my way of dealing with it. So I think, and it worked in the kind of larger scheme of Loki as a story. So I would say stick to kind of what feels right for the story you're telling and the voice in which you're choosing to tell it. I think kids, Andali, Binay, keep, hearing from children, they all want to read horror and crime and thrillers.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I go to any lit fest, especially for children, and I tell them I've written one book for children called The Legend of the Wolf, and it has a small, tiny horror thread. And they're like, this is not scary, scare us more. So everyone, and the last Lit Fest I went to was in Raipur, and the children there were very excited when they heard about my upcoming novel. They all made notes. They said, "What's the name? We're going to. That's the first book we're going to buy." So they are very excited. I don't know how. I mean, we were such scaredy cats, so scaredy cats. And kids today, they want to see. They start off, I think, with Conjuring, and then they're like, "Iske aage, whatever is there, we will take it." So.
Hello everyone, I'm Haripriya from the Bookshelf Library. My question is to Menka. So first of all, congratulations on India's first picture books on transports. Otherwise, we've been, deluded with picture books from the US mostly. So my question to you is, all your books are very, very diverse themes. Like when we talk about Amma, there's Baton, the Sambar, to Nanamal, to Dr. Ira, to Loki. So how do you choose to decide whether it should become a picture book or a chapter book? That is the first one. And my second question is, like Loki, there's a point where Loki decides, okay, this is my life. Like what was the process of coming to that point, and how did you decide to write that part? Thank you.
Oh wow, Haripriya, difficult questions. I think the first one's easier. So there are two kinds of opportunities, I guess. Sometimes I'm very fortunate that I get commissioned to write books by certain publishing houses. And when that process happens, when an editor calls and says, write about Mangalyan, then it comes to me in a format. I mean, it's for this age group. We'd like it to be illustrated. It has to be so many words and things like that. So it comes to me so I automatically in my head, I know I have 1,500 words to tell this story and things like that. And then, of course, books like Loki and Great Escape, I want to write them without knowing if anyone else wants me to write them or not. And then I think as you start writing, the characters, the age they are sometimes, the kind of story you're telling, will decide this is a picture book, or this is a chapter book for, say, 7-8-year-olds, or this is for a slightly older audience and hence longer. So I think sometimes the story will kind of tell you which direction it's going in. I hope that answered. Before I started writing, I used to read authors' interviews or listen to them, and authors would say that, and then the characters just did what they wanted, and they took over the story. And I thought, well, that sounds like rubbish. You're the author, you're writing this, you decide what happens. And I didn't buy into that kind of idea at all. But strangely enough, with Loki, I found that happened. That, yeah, you start writing, and then your characters do decide for themselves through you. It sounds, I swear I'm not one of those woo-woo kind of people, but it sounds like that. But I think it just, maybe it's like you've already decided in your head and you just don't know it. But I think that point where she kind of said, well, sometimes I wondered, because I don't think I would have done that as a child. I don't think I was that kind of child at all. And I think that's why I also wrote Loki, to, in a way, satisfy that part of myself that never found expression. I was a very good girl. I was very good and very obedient. And I famously had an uncle introduce me to someone at a wedding and said, she will not cross the line her mother has drawn for her. I kept hearing that. And I think I thought to myself, well, here's a girl who's going to cross that line, everybody, and do what she wants. So I think it all comes from that. I think it all just comes from all our repressed feelings as children.
I always think, that all this writing is like, all these are my alter egos, the people I could have been. So I definitely would have been a psychopath,
Have you written about a psychopath ever? Not yet. You should. Yeah, it's Anjali, and then I think you.
I think we can only take one last question. So.
Just two fit in small questions, and then Anjali, and that's it.
Mine's not a question, so it doesn't count. I think what I love about both your books is your characters are so real. whether you know them or not, for us, it's like, oh yeah, I know this person. You know, it's just both of you give so much joy from your writing, and absolutely right. Kids do not want kid book. Kids do not want to be taught, and I find that very irritating about parents who say my kid has to read this. I mean, and then they'll say my kid doesn't read. Why will the kid read your boring stuff? Let them pick up, they find your book nice, they'll read it. And as an adult, I know I love reading both your books because I just love your characters. I mean, even the ones who are not lovable, I love them because they're just so real. So thank you both of you for all the hours of pleasure you've given me. And that's not a question, so there's one.
Just one last.
Thank you so much for this enlightening session on children's literature. So we do admire that both of you are breaking new ground in so many ways. But what have your inspirations been? What were your favorite children's literature when you were growing up, or even now? Yeah.
So, like I said, it was a very colonized literature thing that we started reading. In fact, I started out writing fan fiction of Enid Blyton, but in a very twisted way. So, we are very, not dark, but very twisted sort of thing. And because that was what we grew up reading, we didn't know that. There is one thing I want to very quickly add, that I wrote this book called 365 Ghost Stories or Horror Stories, which was published a couple of years ago. And I did my usual thing. I set my characters as Indians, and those publishers, they made me rework that book, and they made everything anglicized. I don't know why. They said, we can't publish it like this. I said, but why? And I was so exhausted. I hated myself at the end of that book, Imagine writing 365 stories about horrors, things. So, and they were very absurd, very dark stories, So I had fun, while I also hated myself through that entire process. But I had to anglicize all those names, and it was weird, I thought, especially in today's day and age, this is not what you would do. But that's the sort of stuff we grew up reading mostly. I don't know. And yeah, R.K. Narayan, Ruskin Bond.
So I kind of skipped the whole Enid Blyton phase because I just found everyone so good. So good, and except the twins in the boarding school. I think that was a little more fun. So as a child, I read a lot of Roald Dahl. And I know Roald Dahl is problematic today, definitely, and cancelled possibly also. Just William, yeah. So Just William and Roald Dahl. But what I loved about Roald Dahl is that the adults all have it coming for them, and they all get it. He does some terrible things to the grown-ups in his book who are all horrible to the children, and it felt so wonderful. It was like a release for that part of myself that I didn't know I wanted, that I wanted to see these things happen. I think today the creators, that I love and who I really look up to and I'm inspired by, Shabnam Vinwala, Bijal Vachirajani, Andalib, who I'm in awe of her prolific writing. Most of my messages to her are like, how do you do this? So yeah, but I think there are some fantastic writings for children today. Correct, absolutely. She's helped me with that too.
So I know we are past the time, but I'm going to make it very quick. First of all, I'm Namrata Sadhwani. Thank you so much. And I just want to say a big thank you to both of you for the countless hours of joy that you've given me and my kids. Menka, my kids love your books. Topi Rockets is an absolute favorite with them. And Andalib, we've had many a conversation about how your books have, helped me through so much. But my question to both of you is, that I am a parent who reads a lot, and my kids are, I think, even more voracious readers than I am. So for me, it's not always possible to, earlier I used to read whatever they were reading and sort of, try and understand what they're reading, because a lot of books these days deal with a lot of difficult topics as well, which were considered taboo but shouldn't. And now conversations are opening up around them, whether it's grief, whether it's diversity, neurodiversity, whether it's menstruation. Do you find parents more accepting of these books, or what is it like when it comes to dealing with parents? Because I really want to know from a parent's perspective, how is it like dealing with parents? Do they object to the topics in your books? Are they hesitant to let their kids pick up your books because of these very reasons? So that's my question. Thank you so much.
So, I think it's very interesting. I'll very quickly, so I was having a conversation with an editor of mine, and she said, you know, if it's non-fiction or faction, that kind of category, biographies, all of that, parents will buy it without reading it. Because in their heads, they're like, well, there can't be anything objectionable in this book, you know, about this moment in time in history or this person or whatever it is. But fiction, all parents want to read once and want to make sure it's okay. And strangely enough, when Loki came out and someone told me, oh, I've bought this as I bought your book as return presents, you know, for my child's birthday party. And I was like, well, how old are the children? She said about 8 or 9. I said, the character gets her periods in this book. Okay, I just want you to know before you, I don't know, some angry parents write to you. And she said, yeah, that's fine, Menaka. You put it in there for a reason. So I find that sometimes I'm possibly more worried about parents reacting a certain way. But I'll tell you this, I bought a series of Sabaa Tahir's book. Have you read her? Yeah, the fantasy series. And I started reading them, then I left it to the side, and my younger son, who's almost 13, but he was 12 when he started, picked it up and started reading it. And he really enjoyed it. And then he made me get him the next one and the next one. And then I read that the book was, had a lot of dark and had some sexual violence in it. And I said, well, does it have these things? And he said, yeah. And I said, do you want to talk about anything? He's like, no, I know everything already. It's all good. If I have any questions, I'll come and ask you. But I still maintain that somehow when we read about these things that as adults we worry about, when children read them in books, it is a very safe space, I think, still created. And I would say rather than watching it on TV or in a movie, I still think books create a much safer space to kind of see how you feel. I think that's because when things get too scary or get too thin, you can just like close it and come back to it when you're ready.
I just want to quickly add that at a recent Lit Fest last week only, this girl came and she signed all 3 copies of Jasmine Villa from me, and I asked her, oh my God, how old are you? Because she said she's 11. I said, someone please hide me from her parents, because you know what Jasmine Villa is like, it's a romance. And she said, are you sure? She said, I've already bought it, you have to sign it. So I signed it, and then I saw her sitting on the lawn, she started reading it also. So I was very worried. I said, if her parents come, I'm not here, So I haven't had that experience, Amrita, mostly because I think I write for young adults, and they do tend to make their own decisions, and I haven't had that experience, so yeah. Thank you for moderating, Deepika. Thank you, Deepa, and everyone, all of you who came, for being a wonderful audience. It was lovely.
No, this was just fantastic. It's great to see so many people come and listen and have questions about children's books. And please let your children read whatever they want.
Thank you, Menaka. Thank you, Andalib.